Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. Today, we're going over my week number 4 start and sit running backs in fantasy football. I just ended up watching I just got finished rather, watching the Lions and Packers Thursday night football game. And let me tell you something, if you own Jahmyr Gibbs in fantasy football, you are fuming, all right? Steam is coming out of your ears right now because he is not getting used nearly enough as a lot of people thought. He was drafted in the 3rd or 4th round maximum of fantasy football drafts, and David Montgomery is over here getting 30-plus touches. It's got to be infuriating, I'm sure, but we're going to go over every other running back start and sit in this video. Obviously, not the Thursday night game because this should be released on Friday. Starting it off with the Falcons versus the Jaguars. I am starting Bijan Robinson, sitting Tyler Algier, starting Travis Etienne Jr., and sitting Tank Bigsby. Quickly, guys, before we head into the rest of this video, if you could quickly hit that subscribe button, it would really help me out. We're on the road to 2,000. Also, drop a thumbs up on this video, share it with your friends, comment down below, whatever you want to do. Anyways, Bijan Robinson. The first 2 weeks of the season, Bijan Robinson was everything you wanted and more out of that first-round draft pick. 20.3 and 21.1 throughout those games in PPR scoring formats. Last week, he struggled, averaging just 3.3 yards per carry against the Detroit Lions. You saw just tonight, Thursday night, Aaron Jones barely had any carries. He didn't really do too much with his carries anyways, okay? The Detroit Lions have a pretty stingy run defense, so I'm going to give Bijan a little bit of a break here, all right? As your #1 running back on your team in fantasy football, I would imagine you have to be starting him on a weekly basis, all right? This matchup against the Jaguars isn't a bad one by any means. Dameon Pierce just had a very nice game against the Jaguars, and Bijan Robinson's talent level is miles above Dameon Pierce's, so Bijan Robinson is a start all day for me. I am sitting Tyler Algier here because after week 1, Algier and Bijan Robinson both were looking like solid fantasy football options heading forward. Maybe you could use them both. Tyler Algier more of a flex option while Bijan will be your #1 running back. After the past 2 weeks, though, I am not so sure that is actually possible. Okay, against Detroit, Algier only played 20 snaps to Bijan's 54. I mean, the split was a little more even in week #1. Algier couldn't get anything going against the Green Bay Packers, which you just saw David Montgomery absolutely incinerate on Thursday night. And then he really struggled against the Detroit Lions. So Tyler Algier is sitting firmly on my bench right now. On the other side of the ball, Travis Etienne Jr., I'm starting him. He bounced back nicely against one of the worst rushing defenses in the Houston Texans last week. The fact that he's been more involved in the passing game is really encouraging to see out of Etienne. 4 catches for 50 yards in week #3. I will say Atlanta does have a pretty stingy run defense so far, giving up just 8.1 PPR fantasy points to running backs, to the starting running backs, that is. That being said, the pure amount of volume that Etienne sees on the ground and through the air just makes him a must-start almost every single week, in my opinion. Tank Bigsby last week, he's a sit this week for me, by the way. He scored it into the end zone last week, but the main issue is he only got 2 touches, and that won't be nearly enough to be fantasy football relevant at all. I think he's a pure handcuff option to Etienne if anything happens to him, if he goes down with an injury, or he somehow, takes him over as that #1 role. I don't see that happening by any means, but yeah, if that happens, that's the only time that you can play Tank Bigsby, in my opinion. Moving on to the Dolphins versus the Bills, I am starting Raheem Mostert, starting Devon Achane, starting James Cook, sitting Latavius Murray, and sitting Damian Harris. After that massive game, 70-20 in the Dolphins' favor over the Denver Broncos, everybody's blood is pumping. Everybody wants a piece of these 2 Dolphins running backs. And you know what you go do? You go out, in my personal opinion, what I would do is go out and trade Mostert to somebody right now, because there's a 99.9% chance Mostert is not going to have a game like that the rest of the season. That being said, I still think Mostert is a weekly start at this point, considering just how effective he has been in the 3 previous games. I do think the Devon Achane rise to stardom is about to begin. Okay, so I would rather have Achane rostered the rest of the season. If you have both of these guys, then you're in a little bit of a different scenario. Now you got a handcuff situation where both guys could be playable week to week, just like we thought Bijan and Algier were going to be at the beginning of the season. As for Devon Achane goes, I'm also going to say I'm starting Achane because there is no way that this guy rushes for over 200 yards on the ground and the team completely ditches him this week. If I was a head coach, I would not let that happen. All right, my guess is that they come close to splitting carries very soon. A-Chain gets a bit more of the passing down work. Even if A-Chain doesn't see as many touches as Mostert this week, I still think he has a good fantasy viable game. He's one of the most explosive rookies coming into the league. We saw that last week against the Broncos. Going into this matchup, Buffalo doesn't have a terrible defense by any means, but I do expect both of these guys to be fine in this matchup. On the other side of the ball, I am starting James Cook. Miami doesn't have a good run defense, currently ranking 22nd against opposing running backs in fantasy football. The reason that I like James Cook heading forward and in this matchup in particular is he has been extremely effective in his last 2 games against Washington and Las Vegas. I would like to see him get a little bit more work in the passing game, though. Okay, this is most likely why you drafted a guy like James Cook, because the Bills aren't known for running the ball a lot, so James Cook should be more involved in the passing game like he was last year. He only had 2 catches last week against the Commanders for 14 yards. That's a little bit concerning to me. Also, another thing that kind of concerns me is that Latavius Murray has been used a lot in goal line situation, which definitely limits Cook's potential to long touchdown runs or passing down touchdowns. There should be a lot of passing in this game against the Dolphins, so that is why I do like Cook as a start this week. I'm sitting Latavius Murray in this matchup. As we just mentioned, Murray is mainly good for those goal line carries, those goal line situations. He's scored in the past 2 games, but that's all you're banking on when you're starting Latavius Murray. Even if he's at your flex position, it's a huge risk that he busts and doesn't get into the end zone. Last but not least, Damian Harris, he gets the same amount of work as Latavius Murray does, except not as many goal line carries and not as many passing down routes run or anything like that. So Latavius Murray, Damian Harris, both sits. James Cook, I would be starting. Moving on to the Bears versus the Broncos. This is the battle of 2 bad defenses here. I'm starting Javonte Williams, sitting Samaje Perine, starting Khalil Herbert, and starting Roschon Johnson. Little bit risky, but we're going to get into it here in a second with those guys. Starting it off with Javonte, though, it's pretty tough to gauge exactly how much Javonte would have been used last week if it wasn't for that 70-20 blowout. I'm not quite giving up on Williams just yet. I'll say that. A lot of people are throwing in the towel. I completely understand, but I'm going to hold on to him a couple more weeks and see what he can do. The main reason that I'm not giving up on him is he hasn't been too ineffective. He hasn't been really effective either, but he's kind of just sitting in that middle tier. He's averaging 3.8 yards per carry and getting a few catches each game to give him somewhat of fantasy value, but not enough to be like comfortable with him at this time. I think he just needs to see more playing time personally. I think Samaje Perine has to take a back seat. Javonte has to step up to get about 16, 17, 16 to 20 carries per game would be ideal, but I don't know if that's exactly going to happen. Even if you don't like Javonte Williams, though, the rest of the season, I would still be playing him in this game against the Bears, who are currently ranking 31st against opposing running backs so far. As for Samaje Perine goes, I am sitting him. It's pretty hard to trust Perine right now, especially because Williams' workload should keep increasing as the year goes on. He only had 5 touches last week against the Miami Dolphins. While not much better, at least Javonte Williams had 13 touches in that game. On the opposite side of the ball, Khalil Herbert, I am starting him. This is the first week that I've said to start Khalil Herbert, I believe. This one's very risky. Okay, I'm saying to start both running backs this week because the Denver Broncos have given up the most points to running backs. As you saw last week, it was an absolute explosion by the Dolphins. So far, Herbert has been fairly effective, all right, but the team as a whole is so bad that he hasn't got over 10 carries in a single game yet because they haven't been winning. Rest of the season, I will say I like Roschon Johnson a lot more than I like Khalil Herbert, but if there's any week to play Herbert, I think it's this one right here. And last but not least, Roschon Johnson, he has been creeping closer and closer to Khalil Herbert's snap count through the first 3 games. I think it's only a matter of time before he eventually takes over that #1 spot. It was 28-23 in Herbert's favor as of snap count last game, but Johnson was more effective in terms of yards per carry and yards per reception in that game. Also, Herbert did lose a fumble, which might work in Roschon's favor, giving him more playing time. I'm not saying that Khalil Herbert is going to get benched because he fumbled 1 time, but I'm just saying it definitely works in Roschon's favor to give him more playing time. Ultimately, whichever Bears running back performs the best in the next couple of weeks is going to be the starter overall. They need that spark on offense, and I think Well, at least I'm hoping that Roschon will emerge as that number one as the weeks go forward. But I'm starting both of them against a bad Broncos defense here. All right, as for the Ravens versus the Browns, I am sitting Justice Hill, sitting Gus Edwards, starting Jerome Ford, sitting Kareem Hunt. Justice Hill goes, he just returned to practice on Thursday, so it could be a while before he is exactly back to 100%. This is a tough matchup for both of these running backs this week. Cleveland is currently ranking number 1 against opposing running backs, so I do not like that at all. As for Gus Edwards goes, same type of deal here. Not a huge fan of Edwards, even if Hill doesn't end up playing. Like I said, he was limited in practice up to Thursday. He's probably going to be good to go by Sunday, but you never know. Gus Edwards last week was running well until that concussion knocked him out late in the fourth quarter. My only problem is that he ended up getting 11 rushing attempts and no passes thrown to him, which severely limits his potential when comparing him to other running backs in fantasy football. I think most likely you'll have a better option to start than Gus Edwards in fantasy. On the opposite side of the ball, I am starting Jerome Ford. So far, we haven't seen any information suggesting that Ford is going to be taken over by Kareem Hunt just yet as the starting running back in Cleveland. I know it's only been 1 week, but the Browns have stated that they are rolling with Ford as their clear main number 1 guy right now. This week coming up will be very telling to see what the snap count is like between Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt. Does Hunt creep up a little bit on Ford this week? We'll have to see what happens. Jerome Ford has been limited in practice this week, but I still like him performing well behind one of the best offensive lines in the league. As for Kareem Hunt goes, he's a sit for me. He was also limited in practice this week with a rib/groin injury, but is expected to play on Sunday. In week 3, he played on just 14 total snaps. I would need to see that increase weekly to feel good about starting him in the future. Bengals versus the Titans is next up on our list. I am starting Joe Mixon, sitting Travion Williams, starting Derrick Henry, and sitting Tajay Spears in this one. Joe Mixon, let's start it off right here, okay? If Joe Mixon is your number 1 running back, I think you don't really have a choice but to start him in this matchup. But if he is not, if he is your number 2 running back or at your flex position, somehow, I'm probably sitting him. All right, I don't like this matchup whatsoever. Before last week, the Titans were top 3 ranking against opposing running backs. With Mixon's mediocre yards per carry so far this season, he's going to need to be placed within the 5-yard line to kind of salvage his week. In my opinion, that's what I've seen. Last week, we saw Jerome Ford sneak into the end zone twice and save his day against a tough Titans defense. I mean, Mixon has the volume to where he could be worth a start in this one, but I'm sure there is better options. As long as he's not your number 1 running back. Like I said, if he's your number 1, you got to put him in and hope for the best. Behind Joe Mixon, we have Travion Williams. He is a sit all day, in my opinion. He had 1 touch last week against the Rams, not even close to enough volume. This is 100% Joe Mixon's backfield. On the opposite side of the ball, we have Derrick Henry. I'm hoping for a bounce back game here from Derrick after that rough 2.0 PPR point crapper against the Cleveland Browns. Henry did have a toe injury heading into this game, but I'm not attributing it all to that toe injury. This was just an awful performance from him overall. This week's matchup doesn't get too much better in the Bengals. I believe they're 8th against opposing running backs, but I don't think you can sit your number 1 drafted running back. I'm assuming Henry would be your number 1 on most fantasy teams. I would keep a very close eye on him in this week and upcoming games to see if Spears keeps out snapping him or if that was just kind of a fluke situation because he was injured against the Cleveland Browns. Moving on to Tajay Spears here. As we're talking about Spears actually out snapping Henry last game, this could be due to a number of factors, all right, including Henry's toe injury that was bothering him or the fact that it was a blowout for most of this game. Nonetheless, I'm sitting Spears in this matchup. He got all those touches, ran all those routes, and only produced 4.9 PPR fantasy points, so that's not going to cut it as the backup to a workhorse like Derrick Henry in this offense. Moving on to the Rams versus the Colts, I am starting Kyren Williams, sitting Ronnie Rivers, starting Zach Moss, and sitting Trey Sermon. As for Kyren Williams goes, he played on 100% of snaps and ran 33 out of a possible 40 routes. There's no doubt in my mind that you need to start Kyren Williams every single week, especially if he's going to get this type of workload. He will produce good numbers. You just have to keep faith in this guy. There will be up and down weeks for him, but overall, he's going to do better more than not with this. The workload is just crazy. All right. As for Ronnie Rivers goes, I'm sitting him all day of the week. He didn't even see the field on Monday night against the Bengals, so that's not even a question, in my opinion. As for Zach Moss goes, he is a start on the opposite side of the ball. He played very well against the Ravens, which definitely surprised me. I can't lie to you. I thought he was going to struggle. I thought he had a, kind of a fool's gold game against the Houston Texans. I was wrong. I will admit that. But anytime a running back gets 30-plus carries in a game, they're bound to perform well like he did against the Ravens. He's the clear #1 running back right now for the Colts and should be started on a weekly basis the way he's performing right now. I personally don't expect Jonathan Taylor to come back and play for the Indianapolis Colts this season, so Zach Moss is looking like a great waiver wire pickup for anyone who got him. I am sitting Trey Sermon, who is behind Zach Moss in this offense. He played on just 18 snaps on Sunday. Not going to be enough work, not enough touches for him to be fantasy relevant just yet. Next up, we have the Bucs versus the Saints. I'm starting Rachaad White. Yes, I'm doing it again. We'll talk about it in just a second. I'm sitting Sean Tucker, starting Alvin Kamara, and sitting Tony Jones Jr. As for Rachaad White goes, he played on over 91% of the snaps Monday night against the Philadelphia Eagles. He is the clear #1 running back on this offense, the clear workhorse for this team. The offensive line, it's no secret, has been struggling. All right, Philadelphia has a great run defense. We're just hoping for better production from Rachaad White and this offensive line heading forward. Also, do not go out and trade Rachaad White for just dog crap. Do not go throwing him away for nothing because he's worth more than that. He will produce better numbers later in the season. I can guarantee you that. If he keeps seeing the same workload, it's almost impossible that he doesn't perform to some capacity. As for Sean Tucker goes right behind him, he's not getting enough work right now. Like I said, Rachaad White played on 91% of the snaps Monday night. Alvin Kamara, clear, easy decision. He's going to be a start almost every single week for me, probably. You've been waiting 4 weeks for this moment that Kamara finally returns from that suspension, and you are going to have to start him. All right, tough matchup, especially because the Saints haven't gotten much going on the ground so far this year. But he should see enough volume to balance that out. He should see the passing work. He should see most of the running work because none of these running backs have gotten anything going yet. Tony Jones Jr., he is a sit right now. He should go back to being a pure backup role to Kamara this week. Not interested whatsoever in Tony Jones Jr. Moving on to the Commanders and the Eagles. I'm sitting Brian Robinson Jr., sitting Antonio Gibson, starting DeAndre Swift, and sitting Kenneth Gainwell. Brian Robinson Jr., after seeing how the Eagles have stopped every running back in their tracks so far, I am out on both of these Commanders running backs. Robinson was seeing more passing work, I should say, and snaps than Gibson up till last week. I do expect that to return to normal when the Commanders are actually involved in these games and close, not getting blown out 31-0. This could have easily been due to the game being a blowout, like I just said, and trying to come from behind, but it's still not encouraging knowing that if the Commanders do find themselves in a big hole, that they're going to lean a lot heavier on Antonio Gibson. Then we head on to Antonio Gibson. He's still a sit. He had the game script, the snaps, everything falling in his favor, and still did absolutely nothing with it. So Antonio Gibson, if he's on your bench right now, I'd drop him. I would. Nope. Sorry, buddy. You're headed to the curb. We can't use you anymore this season. At least for right now. And he has a big issue fumbling the ball. I don't know. Every year we're promised something with Gibson that we don't get. So I'm done. I'm done with Antonio Gibson. There's very few players in the league like that I feel so strongly about that I've drafted time and time again that just do nothing. Antonio Gibson is definitely one of them. On the opposite side of the ball, I am starting DeAndre Swift. It is a no-brainer decision in my opinion. Swift took over as the #1 real running back in Philly. He should be started every week going forward, I think, because he is behind the best offensive line in football. As for Kenneth Gainwell goes, I am sitting Gainwell on my bench until he reclaims that #1 role somehow, whether it's an injury, whatever. If Swift struggles, whatever the case is, Gainwell is not startable right now, in my opinion. Vikings versus the Panthers. I am starting Alexander Mattison, sitting Cam Akers, starting Miles Sanders, and sitting Chuba Hubbard. As for Alexander Mattison goes, I'm starting him one more week against the 30th ranked rushing defense right now. This is a solid game for him. It should be. He had a solid game last week as well, but nothing too crazy. All right, 17.5, I believe it was in PPR. I'm really interested, though, to see what Cam Akers brings to this team. Some people say he sucks. Some people believe in him. I'm kind of neutral on him. But time will tell. All right. Time will tell whether we can still start Madison or we will sit him on the bench. There's a very, very slim chance, in my personal opinion, that Madison can still produce running back 2 numbers even after Akers, gets more and more and more involved into this offense into the rest of the season. But it all starts in week 4. We're going to see it in this game. So as for Cam Akers goes, I am waiting to see what he can do. I'm sitting him on the bench this week. I don't think he's going to be startable for a couple more weeks until he gathers his full workload into this offense. On the opposite side of the ball, Miles Sanders. I am starting Miles Sanders in this one. He's getting enough passing volume to at least be a flex play on most fantasy teams right now. Not sure if I'm particularly comfortable playing him no matter the matchup, but Minnesota doesn't have a great run defense, so I would be comfortable playing him in this one. He had 5 catches for 38 yards against Seattle last week. Didn't see very many rushing attempts. Only had 9 rushing attempts for 24 yards and a touchdown in that one. Saw double Chuba Hubbard's snap count. So he's clearly the #1 running back here, but I need to see him getting more work. I would like to see him more involved in this game against the Vikings. As for Chuba Hubbard, I'm sitting him. He only had 3 touches on 26 total snaps last week, which is not a good ratio whatsoever. Not enough work to be started in fantasy. Now we have the Steelers versus the Texans. I am sitting Najee Harris, starting Jaylen Warren, sitting Dameon Pierce, and sitting Devin Singletary. Listen, hate on me all you want. Hate on me all you want that I'm sitting Najee Harris. I'm done with Najee right now. He's similar to Antonio Gibson, in my opinion, in terms of starting him. Right? He's not just quite as bad. He's getting a lot more touches than Gibson is, but you know what I mean. All right. You know it's bad when I don't even feel confident starting Najee Harris against one of the worst rushing defenses in the entire NFL. Without a few long runs in the first couple of games, Najee Harris hasn't done anything at all. 5.3, 5.3, and 6.5 PPR fantasy points in 3 games so far. He's looked atrocious. Nope, I don't want anything to do with him this week. As for Jaylen Warren goes, I am starting him, or I would be starting him if I had to pick one of these guys. Najee Harris saw 3 more snaps than Jaylen Warren did last week, and Warren ran more routes than him by 5. If we keep seeing Jaylen Warren's usage increase, I think it would be a clear sign that Jaylen Warren is slowly going to be taking over this #1 role. It's not going to happen all at once, and Najee is not going to be fully phased out of this offense by any means, but Jaylen Warren could be the snap leader in these upcoming weeks. Each week so far, Warren has inched closer and closer and closer to eclipsing Najee in snaps. So keep an eye on that this week once again. Opposite side of the ball, I'm sitting Dameon Pierce. Pierce has not been great this season by any means. He found the end zone on a 1-yard carry early on last week against the Jaguars, which could lead to many fantasy managers having false hope about him heading forward. Personally, I'm not getting fooled by Dameon Pierce. Again, he was pretty unusable last year towards the end of the season. I think it's definitely carrying over into the beginning of this season. The Texans so far have been playing from behind, which is also not great, not Pierce's strong suit by any means. And even last week, when the Texans were ahead in that game, almost the entire game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, Pierce only had 14 carries. While Devin Singletary, who is a sit this week, by the way, had 9 carries, which is good for Devin Singletary, but not for Dameon Pierce. As for Singletary goes, I doubt he sees that much work heading forward, especially if they are not winning by about, what are they winning by 20 points, 37-17 last week. So I don't see Devin Singletary getting that usage every single week. Both of these guys are sits. Moving on to the Raiders versus the Chargers. I'm starting Josh Jacobs, sitting Zamir White, starting Austin Eckler. If he plays, he might not play. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then I am sitting Joshua Kelly no matter what. Josh Jacobs. All right, Josh Jacobs, it's no secret. Nobody's excited about Josh Jacobs right now. He's off to a very slow start for his standards, especially leading the league in rushing in 2022 and now getting off to one of the slowest starts out of all the running backs in the league. He's still getting almost all the work at the running back position, though, so I don't think you can really panic too much at the moment. He's a clear buy low trade target, in my opinion, and he has a great matchup this week, so he should get back on track here against the Chargers. Zamir White, he's a sit. He only saw 1 single snap Sunday night, while Amir Abdullah saw 12. So that's not good for Zamir White's stock at all. Austin Eckler on the opposite side of things, I think he is a must start. He has been a limited participant in practice so far up to Friday. If he does play, there's no way you sit this guy against a pretty poor Raiders defense. But if he doesn't play, moving on to Joshua Kelly, we're still sitting him. We found out this last week. Joshua Kelly, I thought he just had a bad game against the Tennessee Titans, and so did a lot of other people, but he's just bad. He is just not a good running back. All right. Even when Eckler was out, he had a good matchup, like I said last week, and he just couldn't do anything with it. So Joshua Kelly is not going in any of my lineups here on out. Don't care if Eckler plays. Don't care if he doesn't play. All right. No, thank you. All right, moving on to the Patriots versus the Cowboys. I am sitting Ramondre Stevenson, sitting Ezekiel Elliott, starting Tony Pollard, and sitting Rico Dowdle. As for Ramondre goes, he outsnapped Zeke. He had more carries than Zeke. Zeke had 16 and Ramondre had 19. But he was way less effective than Zeke was. All right, my main problem here is how much he's getting targeted out of the backfield compared to last year. In this game against the New York Jets, he had 4 targets out of the backfield, which is absolutely nothing from what we're used to seeing from Ramondre Stevenson, especially last year. Until that number goes up, I'm not really comfortable starting him. All right, we drafted him because he gets so much work out of the backfield in the passing game, and so far, that just hasn't come true. Exactly for Ramondre. As for Ezekiel Elliott goes, I know he had a increase in snaps last week. I do think he's going to be used slightly more once again against his old team here. I still think you can't be starting a guy like Zeke just yet because there are a lot of better options in the league. So I'm sitting Ezekiel Elliott here. On the opposite side of the ball, Tony Pollard, clear workhorse, #1 running back for the Cowboys every single week. I think it's a no-brainer decision. Sitting Rico Dowdle. Scored last week on a passing play, but he only saw 11 out of a possible 81 snaps on offense. He's going to need to be extremely efficient to do well based off those numbers. So he's a sit in my opinion. On to the Cardinals versus the 49ers. I'm starting James Conner, sitting Keontae Ingram, starting Christian McCaffrey, sitting Elijah Mitchell. As for James Conner, Conner proved last week that he shouldn't be counted out despite his matchup. All right, 49ers do have a better defense than the Cowboys, but he surprised me last week with how well he played against Dallas. I think Conner gets so much work on a weekly basis, at least on the ground. He wasn't that effective, or he wasn't even, I don't think he had any targets out of the backfield last week, which is pretty surprising because normally he has a high floor for targets out of the backfield. In this game against the 49ers, nonetheless, I would limit expectations just a bit, but I think he's still got to be locked in to your flex or running back 2 position, because just in case he finds the end zone, just in case they get down to the 1 or 5 to 1 yard line, he could have a chance to score in this one. As for Keontae Ingram goes, he played on 9 out of a possible 61 snaps. That's not going to be good enough for fantasy relevance. Christian McCaffrey on the opposite side of the ball, no-brainer, one of the best running backs in the entire NFL, must start every single week. Elijah Mitchell, a sit, but he finally saw a decent amount of usage last Thursday against the Giants. Christian McCaffrey was still the clear workhorse running back on this offense, but at least he got some action in this one. Mitchell should be sitting on your bench every single week until McCaffrey, either something happens to McCaffrey, he's got to be the pure handcuff here. All right, if you have McCaffrey, go out, get Elijah Mitchell off waivers and just keep him on your bench. Moving on to the Chiefs and the Jets. I'm sitting all the Chiefs running backs, Isaiah Pacheco, Jerick McKinnon, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I am starting Breece Hall in deep formats only. Let's get that very clear right now. If you don't have to start him, don't. Sitting Dalvin Cook and sitting Michael Carter. As for Isaiah Pacheco goes, this is a 3-headed backfield. I just talked about it in my recent trade away players video. He was in it. I haven't seen enough consistency yet to really rely on any of them in my starting lineup. Pacheco did have a good game last week against the Chicago Bears, who have a atrocious defense, but Helaire just had just as many carries as him. Okay, they had 15 each, which is definitely concerning. I know it was a blowout, so that might have been the reason. Also, Pacheco was injured a little bit heading into this game, but the snap count didn't really vary too much from previous weeks. As for Jerick McKinnon goes, he saw the majority of the passing down work and found the end zone on 2 out of his 3 catches on Sunday against the Bears. That is not sustainable by any means. All right, he would need to see a lot more targets for me to feel comfortable playing him. And then Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 15 carries against the Bears and a touchdown in that game. Who knows who's going to score the points? I really am not comfortable playing any of these guys because any of them could score the touchdowns. As for Breece Hall goes, like I said, I want to nail it in your heads right now. He should be only played in deep formats if you need a guy at the flex position. He had a horrible game against the Patriots, averaging just 1.5 yards per carry. He had 1 catch for 9 yards on 2 targets. Now, his playing time is increasing, but this offensive line is not doing him any favors right now, and teams are stacking the box to try to prevent him, Cook, and Michael Carter from getting any yards out of the backfield, forcing Zach Wilson to throw the ball more, and he is just not doing anything with those attempts right now. As for Dalvin Cook goes, he saw just 1 more snap than Michael Carter did and didn't do much more than Hall did with his opportunities, so I'm out on Dalvin Cook, and Michael Carter doesn't get enough touches on this offense, but he did play 15 snaps last week, so that's a little bit of an improvement from previous. Last but not least, the Seahawks versus the Giants. I'm starting Kenneth Walker, sitting Zach Charbonnet, sitting Matt Breida, sitting Gary Brightwell. Kenneth Walker is still the guy in Seattle. All right, he ranks 3rd out of all running backs in fantasy football currently, getting enough passing work to feel good about him. This is a great matchup against a Giants defense that has been struggling so far. Also, Kenneth Walker is getting almost every goal line touch, which is huge. As for Zach Charbonnet goes, he is creeping up on Walker in terms of snap count, but he still has a while to go, in my opinion, before he is startable. If you have Kenneth Walker, go out and grab Zach Charbonnet off waivers just in case anything happens to him. On the opposite side of the ball, as for Matt Breida goes, I'm not really trusting Breida in this one. Seattle has a sneakily, I don't think they're as bad on the rushing defense side of things as people think when they look at him. In the last game, he only had 4 carries, but he did find the end zone in that game against the 49ers to kind of save his fantasy day. Gary Brightwell couldn't go anywhere on the ground against the Niners on Thursday. Did have 3 targets, though, and 2 catches for 31 yards. So more than I expected last week out of Gary Brightwell. Still a definite sit this week against the Seattle Seahawks. So anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to, as always, drop a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Let me know any questions you have, start, sit, whatever trade questions in the comment section down below. I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.